Hello and welcome on France 24. I'm Clarisse Fortuné and you're watching Eye on Africa. First, the headlines. An additional 600 Kenyan officers are to be sent to Haiti, a pledge following Haitian Prime Minister's visit to Kenya. But President William Ruto also urges the international community to do more. South African president survives the so-called Farmgate scandal after criminal charges against him are dropped. Cyril Ramaphosa was accused of trying to hide the theft of $4 million in cash at his game farm. And we've heard it before, solar power could be the solution to fill the energy gap in Africa. But now some say this can be achieved by 2030, just over 5 years' time. Haitian Prime Minister is in Kenya for a 4-day visit. Gary Coney met with President William Ruto to discuss the security situation in Haiti and the multinational force led by the Kenyan police at the heart of their discussions. Ruto already pledged to send an additional 600 officers, but both urged the international community to do more. Bastien Renou reports from Nairobi.
"600 Kenyan policemen will be deployed in Haiti within a month. They are currently training here in Kenya," said Kenya's President William Ruto during a press conference with Haiti's Prime Minister. 10 countries pledged to send 2,900 policemen and soldiers in Haiti to take part in this multinational security mission in Haiti. But so far, only Kenya really sent troops on the ground. 400 policemen in June and 600 more will arrive in November. According to Kenya's President William Ruto, the situation on the ground has improved since the beginning of the operation, but it did not prevent the worst massacres in years to occur last week around the city of Ponsonde. 115 people were killed by gang members. According to Haiti's Prime Minister, Kenyan policemen were quick to react. They arrived in the city within a few hours and they managed to bring back security around Ponsonde. Kenya's president and Haiti's prime minister mostly spoke about security issues, but they also mentioned the trade and tourism exchanges between the two countries. They said that bigger investments are needed. And Kenya's President William Ruto called for more cooperation between the African Union and Caribbean states that he called Africa's sixth region.
Will South African president put the Farmgate behind him? Corruption charges were finally dropped against Cyril Ramaphosa in a case that nearly brought down the president 2 years ago. He was accused of trying to hide the theft of $4 million in cash at his game farm in the Limpopo province. The president denied any wrongdoing. Tom Kennedy has been following the story from Cape Town.
So after 2 years of investigation, the National Prosecuting Authority here has found there is not enough evidence to charge Cyril Ramaphosa with corruption over the so-called Farmgate scandal, which dates back to 2020 when thieves broke into his Limpopo farm and stole up to $4 million US in cash. Now that was only brought to light when Arthur Fraser, a former intelligence boss here in South Africa, made allegations that the president was allegations of corruption, kidnapping, bribery, and money laundering related to the case. He also alleged that that cash was stashed there to avoid South African foreign currency laws. Now, Ramaphosa came back and did acknowledge that break-in did happen, although he denied wrongdoing. He said that he made the money through selling buffalo on his game farm. And this case has been extremely political. Arthur Fraser was a close ally of Jacob Zuma, who was replaced by Cyril Ramaphosa after he stepped down from allegations of corruption, and since then has been a fierce opponent of Ramaphosa. And it's also reflective of divisions within the ANC of members who support the president and those who are critical of him. But Thursday's decision, obviously very positive for those standing behind Cyril Ramaphosa.
October 11, International Day of the Girl. UNICEF reports that more than 370 million girls and women in the world experienced rape or sexual assault before the age of 18. That's 1 in 8 girls and women. Another shocking number, Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest number of victims with 79 million affected. Esther Ruiz is a child protection specialist at UNICEF West and Central Africa. She told us why the numbers were so high.
In Sub-Saharan Africa, we have many countries that are fragile or conflict-affected countries, and the risk of contact sexual violence against girls in fragile settings is more than 2 times the global average due to the weakening of the protective systems, conflict and displacement. So in those situations, usually girls and women are in a higher risk of being victims of sexual violence, rapes and other kind of sexual violence.
Can you also talk about the effects of this violence on the children?
Yeah, the data revealed that the scale of the sexual violence, especially on adolescent girls, have impact during their whole life in many cases. Survivors often carry the trauma into adulthood, facing higher risk, for example, of sexually transmitted diseases, substance abuse, drugs or alcohol, social isolation. We have mental health issues like anxiety, depression, even girls, adolescent or older women that self-harm. So the challenges are really huge, and also they have challenges in forming healthy relations when they get adult.
So Esther, you work for UNICEF. So what can be done to prevent and also to respond to this violence?
There's a lot that we can do. We need to work together. That's the most important thing. It's the work that we should do. Families, the society in general, the governments, we need to invest more. We need to invest in the prevention and in the response. We need laws to prevent sexual violence. We need laws that prevent, for example, online violence. That's a new phenomenon that it's affecting a lot of children and adolescents and women too. So we need laws that protect women and children from sexual violence online.
After the University Teachers Association of Ghana, the Catholic Church, country's largest and most influential, has been holding mass protests on the streets of Accra to demand an end to illegal gold mining. The church is the latest to join several groups to demand government action on a menace that is now responsible for dissipating a third of the country's forests.
As Christians, we feel compelled to do something beyond the many statements that have been issued regarding this disaster. Hence, our environmental prayer walk, to beseech God for his help and also to pray for those in public offices who are vested with power to direct our collective resolve.
Solar power could be the solution that could fill the energy gap in which some 400 million people are trapped. 80% of them live in sub-Saharan Africa, and some claim this can be achieved by 2030, just over 5 years' time. Patrick Touré is the head of policy and regional strategy at GOGLA, the Global Association for the Off-Grid Solar Energy Industry, and explained to us how it will work.
Today we know that of the communities or the people who live without electricity, particularly if we're trying to provide them with quality service, about 22% only can afford what we call a tier 1 energy product, which is basically providing a lighting to 3 lights in a house and ability to charge a cell phone or run a radio. The rest of them cannot afford it. And this is the biggest challenge that we have. And we really need to do what we can as a global community. One, to not only make sure that we look at how do we lower the cost. Across the world today, you'll find electricity has always been a public service that is delivered through essentially public resources to subsidize the cost. And we also need to bring access to them, which means what can we do to make sure that these solar panels are available right where they live? Because if it's available but nowhere near where them in their capital cities or urban areas, then it's not available. So we need to really do what we can as a global community, look at lowering the cost or essentially subsidizing and making sure that they can afford it based on their cost of living or the income that they're able to generate, as well as making sure it's available in their communities, which is what we as an industry are working on.
So do you have a time frame? When will ordinary people begin to feel the benefits of your project?
We're actually seeing today, over the last decade, over 550 million people are already benefiting from this. However, the challenge remains there's over 685 million other people who still don't have access to energy, and we will not be able to reach them because of what I've already mentioned without really concerted effort. And this is one of the important things that came out of the conference this week. We saw the World Bank and the Africa Development Bank early this year announce a $5 billion effort that's supposed to leverage another $10 billion to really reach about 300 million people with energy access and really addressing the things that I've mentioned. But the technology is there. The companies are there. The issue is really how do we create meaningful access, addressing this affordability issue and making sure they are aware and it's also available in the communities that they live.
Now to Chad. Capital is once again under threat as floodwaters rise. Residents are trying to reinforce the banks of the swelling river Chari by placing sandbags along the edge. The UN says the punishing rains have affected almost 2 million across the country since July. Clémence Valère has the story.
During a brief respite from the torrential rains which have plagued West and Central Africa, the residents of N'Djamena try to organize themselves to cope with the flooding of the Chari and Logon rivers. Armed with shovels and hose, they fill sandbags to reinforce the dikes along the river.
These young people you see around here are from the neighborhood. They come to try to work and give what they can. They just want to push back the water. They try to put up a little dam to prevent the water from flooding the area.
Several districts of the Chadian capital have been submerged by the river waters, which reached a record level of 8.18 meters last Wednesday, surpassing the November 2022 levels by 4 centimeters.
We can't just stand by and let the water come in and knock people's houses down. We're here, we're all neighbors. Some of them are going to come here to help us, and we're going to help them as well.
According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the rains and flooding have affected almost 10% of the population, or almost 2 million people. For his part, Prime Minister Alamai Halina convened a crisis meeting with several ministers and the army to call for a general mobilization.
Flooded streets of N'Djamena to conclude our edition. Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. Stay on France 24 for more news.
Ahmed Sékou Touré, a leading figure in Guinean independence, left his mark on the country's history, but his legacy remains deeply controversial. Amid national tributes and the memories of a dark past, his regime continues to cause divisions 40 years after his death.
President Sékou Touré's system of governance was one of permanent conspiracy. He had people killed, and everyone knew they were at Camp Boiro.
However, for part of today's generation, Sékou Touré remains a source of inspiration.
He liberated Guinea, I liberated Guinean rap. That's it. It's telling people that when you fight, you can get what you want.
A legacy of independence and terror. Watch Sékou Touré's Guinea Revisited on France 24.